Everyone, welcome back to episode 2 of Check the Wire with myself, DanGheesling, Northernlion. What's going on, man?
Hey, what's up? Excited to be back. Episode 1 went well. You know, the hard part is that we record these like 5 days in advance of releasing them. So it feels like, oh, we're going to put out the next episode right away, but it doesn't come out for like 4 more days.
Yeah, I will say it was kind of like this was out of all the projects and stuff we've launched, I was very excited to see the feedback to this. And it was kind of like, all right, let's kind of the same thing as you. All right, let's record the next one. But, you know, we got to pump the brakes a little bit. We got the overlay corrected one step at a time. Your name's over your name if you're watching the video on youtube.com/Northernlion. And we're good. So thanks for the feedback, guys. But let's jump right into it, man. So you had something pretty big happen you've been grinding away. You've had the pickaxe. You've been mining TikTok, and all of a sudden, what happened?
I did go viral on TikTok. Now, unlike some people in this call, I haven't had like a 500,000 view TikTok take off yet, but I did get a 190,000 view TikTok. And I gotta tell you, it's like having videos go viral on YouTube is, I mean, first off, it's never really happened to me to a huge extent, but it's kind of like you don't even notice that it's gone viral until you check your stats. When something goes viral on TikTok, your phone is like, user 99 liked your post, user 75 commented on your post. They posted the copy paste thing that's like, who asked featuring nobody, and then the playback bar is like a third of the way through. It was blowing on my phone like all day.
So when that happened, but did you know why, or just like it finally happened? What was your initial reaction to it?
I'll tell you. So like, if for anybody that hasn't seen it, I mean, it's an 11-second piece of content. It's not Citizen Kane, but it's from the PS4 game Dreams, where people can make their own custom levels, and it's a level where you play as a dog that can poop. And then there's this old like BuzzFeed news video where someone says like, this is why I hate video games. They're the ultimate male power fantasy. And I said that, and then I pooped in the lake, and text popped up on the screen and went special poop. That's basically it. But I'll tell you, I had conviction. When I saw the clip after my stream, I was like, that one's gonna hit for sure.
So
there was not a doubt in my mind.
Okay, I was gonna ask you, where does it like in like I gotta know, you've had some TikToks where like, oh, this is a banger, and then it flops. But this isn't one of those. You're like, this is grade A TikTok material.
Absolutely.
Can
I tell you though? Yeah. I wanted to ask you about it too, because like some of your TikToks, like they're wildly divergent. Some of them just get traction, some of them get nothing. But like for yours, I don't notice a difference at all.
In terms of
every single one of them, I'm like, it's exactly the same, but they get like 100 times or 1% as many views as the next one.
I'm right there with you. I have like a general formula. It's like, okay, first thing, you put a little title there, explain the viewer what they're about to see, try to tell a story in 15 seconds, put a trending song on it, and let it fly. And you know, I had one hit 1 million. I don't know if I told you that. It's 1 million spins. That's crazy. And then, you know, but then the next 6 were like 1,000, 2,000. I think I have 1 to 500 views. So it's just like, unlike you, when I throw it out there, I'm like, oh man, this is maybe not my best work, and those are the ones that pop off. So it's just, which I think there was an interesting comment on your video or your video from the podcast, and it said, you know, how are you comparing YouTube to TikTok? And I don't think I explained it properly, but there is not enough content on the platform, so you get a lot of organic growth. Where in the early days of YouTube, I think there were a lot of eyes there, and it's the same thing. There's not enough content there as in terms of eyeballs, which is why someone like you and I, with not a large following on TikTok, get the views for it. And I think whether it's in gaming or whatever, I just think there's a lot of opportunity there for people that are listening in to maybe, you know, you see, like I'm starting to see like doctors on there and realtors and, you know, cooking. There's the cooking stuff, and there's a lot of good stuff on there, but.
I mean, like I've explained it to people before, but like I started YouTube pretty early on, but not at the earliest. There were people on YouTube who became like actual millionaires because they did a video of them like crushing a can with their forehead, and they got 30 million views and 1 million people subscribed over the course of like 10 years. And that became like their life. It's bizarre.
And on your side of things on YouTube, I would say, and I don't know, I'm going to speak for you and then you correct me. The closest, I'm going to say, you've had your viral videos viral on your channel, to me, when I think of that, I think of like the launch day of Rebirth or the launch day of Afterbirth. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think that's probably. I mean, there's like Rebirth, Afterbirth, like Flash Isaac coming out in the DLC for Flash Isaac, and then on top of that, like I did a let's look at of Minecraft on Xbox Live Arcade, which was the first platform it went to after PC, and that got like it was probably my fastest video that ever got to 1 million views. And it must have just been through search traffic because the comments were just terrible. The comments were horrible. I feel like I can say it with no malice because most of the people who left those comments in 2012 are probably adults now and are like, yeah, I was just a little kid back then. But yeah, I've never had anything that I think got like such traction that it got picked up and like, taken to the moon or anything like that. But I think that's fair to say.
And it sounds like, and I'm going from my experience as well, the ones that I've had pop, and it sounds like the ones that you've had pop are like environmental factors where it's like, hey, you're known for this, and then there's a big external event that happens, like a game release, or you might have been I'm guessing you're one of the first people to review Minecraft on Xbox Live. Do you remember, like, roughly, was that?
Yeah, it was probably, like, I think I came out with the video the day that it came out on Xbox Live, so it was probably like, I mean, there just like weren't that many people doing it back then. You could just throw up like a 30-minute video of you playing something on launch day, and there are like 2 other people that did it. So anybody that went to YouTube and was like Minecraft Xbox, you were right there. And then you hear me saying like, well, the PC version is better, but if you don't have a good PC, you can get it on Xbox. So you go, this guy is an idiot. He doesn't even friends list integration, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But actually, I wanted to flip it back to you because I didn't put it on the topic sheet, but I had a question for you because you missed day 1 of the Golden Goblet for Slay the Spire.
Huh?
You made your own bespoke video for it, and the video crushed it. It got like 5 times more views than the typical Golden Goblet video does.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about that?
So for context, myself, Ryan, and Melf, we have a competition series where every week we play a new game. The videos come out at the same time, and I missed the daily cutoff time. So the video I was going to record, it wouldn't have counted for day 1. And I got to be honest, I rarely get emotional about something, but I was really like internally like disappointed. I'm like, man, like I let the people that are expecting it down. Ryan and Melf think I'm not going to take this serious, which that's how I would feel if like you missed a video. I'd be like, okay, I must not care. And I'm like, man, I was upset. I'm like, okay, I let it, when I found out the video, I couldn't do the video. I'm like, not take 90 seconds. Like, you're disappointed, but now what are you going to do? You can't rewind the time to get in the daily cutoff. So I'm like, I don't know, just do something that you think maybe people will laugh at. And I just started just going, and I think it's to tie it back to kind of almost how it got to this point, but with your content, just doing stuff that's out of the norm seems to work better than scheduled, like projected here, here's Slay the Spire, here's 50 minutes of gameplay versus, people just want to see random stuff that may or may not be funny.
Yeah, it's like the fact that you screwed up was actually like an advantage in a way. Yeah. If only, I think that all the time too. I'm like, if only I could like capture the energy that leads to the mistakes being like catapulted to actually being entertaining. Yeah. Instead, I'm like, because I spend my whole day being like, oh, I got to get out the next episode of Hitman, or I got to get out like the next episode of this thing. Sometimes I miss it and I do something else instead, and it's like 5 times more popular.
No, I get it. But for me, I kind of take it serious where I think it's something I learned. I don't know where, maybe in the past decade. And this applies to, this video and even like how I take things in life. If I make a big mistake, especially in front of other people, the best thing that I've learned is like you own up to it as fast as possible and people either laugh or get over it. And sometimes cringe is not the right word because I don't use that. But like sometimes, maybe on Twitch you're watching someone and they're like covering up for the mistake. And it's like by doing that, you're just prolonging like bad stuff happening, where if you just say, I made a mistake, you move on, it worked well in the video, which wasn't the plan, but in real life too, is, if I mess something up, like, hey, I was supposed to, take something out of the oven at 4:15 and 4:45, there's smoke everywhere. I'm like, instead of making 100 excuses, I'm like, hey, I forgot to do it. I'm sorry. Let me do something else. It just seems to work out better. Because I feel like you have a similar mindset of, bad stuff happens, you just adopt it and move forward. But I also don't want to speak for you either.
Yeah, I think I try to adopt that attitude, but sometimes like in the moment, I definitely do get defensive, and I'm like, well, the reason that I screwed this up is blah blah. But I mean, I agree with you 100%. Like, it's hard to stay mad at somebody that's like, yeah, I messed up, because especially if it's like, I just got distracted or it slipped my mind or something like that. It happens, all the time.
But it's like
So how are you supposed to stay mad at somebody that just made a human mistake?
yeah, no, it's part of life. But also we brought up talking about TikTok because I want to keep things a little bit on schedule. You did something pretty unique, and I thought it was very insightful on your end of things. Is that you had like a Q&A on Twitter, but you did it on TikTok, and I think it probably got posted on Reddit a bunch too. So you made essentially one piece of content, and it hit 3 different areas. Was that where, because TikTok, you and I post a lot of like funny videos or what we perceive to be funny, but this was fairly serious and you took like a 90-degree turn on that. What made you do that?
So here's my overall philosophy on TikTok. The public perception in our demographic, for the most part, I think, is that TikTok is predominantly for teenagers, young adults. The only things that get posted on it are like, I mean, lies and scams. There's a lot of those, and a lot of the renegade, a lot of dances, right? But I think like, yes, I see a ton of that, and I can't scroll through it fast enough to tell the algorithm I don't want to see any more of it. But I think that like, if you judge a platform simply based on what it's most popular for, you kind of only get a small view or a very narrow view of what it's about. So I thought like, instead of looking at TikTok and trying to like turn my content into something that's good for TikTok, what if I just treated it as like a good place to dump short form videos that like wouldn't fit well on my YouTube channel? So it was really, for me, it's kind of like, I guess, being the change I want to see in the world from like a perception standpoint, is like, I don't see it as a place where you have to go and like pander to what I'm going to say disrespectfully is like the lowest common denominator of entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
I think instead you could just use it for like short form video stuff, and it's just a good distribution platform for that. But those videos like didn't take off and go anywhere really, but still like every single one of them got like 1,500 or 2,000 views on TikTok. And I think for like one person to ask a question and then give the answer to 2,000 people is still valuable in and of itself.
Yeah, and I think I know whoever asked those questions, like, it served the purpose of them, and I'm sure they felt good about it. But and I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong. I've followed your stuff for a long time. We've been friends for a while. I can't think of a lot of times when I've seen you like do a direct Q&A. This has got to be one of the first times, right?
Yeah, I think like for a long time I was kind of the opinion that what I do is, I guess, self-evident, and like you shouldn't, like the YouTuber, Twitch streamer, content creator like style of living is not that entertaining for the most part. So I think that's what I told myself. But then like as I've gotten older, I've realized that like I'm really interested in what other people do. Like if you're like a garbage collector, I want to talk to you for half an hour and be like, what's the best part of the job? What's the worst part of the job? If you're like what does a banker even do? I'm so like in my own bubble that if I got to interact with these people, I would love to ask them those questions. So I put myself in the shoes of other people who have probably never met or have known like a YouTuber or a content creator they can ask those questions, and thought that like, this is a good way for me to provide some value there and maybe give some insight that to me, I've thought of it 1,000 times, but to them, they're like, oh, I've never thought of it that way.
Yeah, and that's some of the feedback that I've read about the first episode of the podcast. Is there were a lot of people who brought up, hey, I'm interested in you guys start talking about time management a little bit and what it's like on your end, because, and not to keep flipping it to you, but we've talked about how many videos you produce in a day, and I would say I worked a 9 to 5, but I don't want to take the average. I don't want to assume anything, but I know on an average 9 to 5 cubicle job, you're probably not grinding out 9 to 5. You're on Reddit, maybe you're watching a Twitch show or something. So to keep up that level of productivity, and I don't want to go too far on a tangent here. Like, is it just for you? Like, do you wake up and you have a list of these are the 8 videos I need to do, or how do you organize that?
Honestly, like, it's just I treat it almost like triage in a hospital, whereas like I wanted to do the videos that have to come out ASAP. If I need something for today, that's got to happen. If I need something for tomorrow, that's got to happen. But Mostly, I think it's honestly the time management in this job is really easy because you just like you're playing video games. Like I think you either like it or you don't like it. If you like it, it's really easy to do a lot of it, I think. And if you don't like it, then it's probably like pulling teeth.
So
But I mean, oh, go ahead. Yeah.
I'm gonna ask you a personal perspective. Like, how do you keep out? Like, so say you're recording an Isaac video and you have like, how do you block Reddit or whatever social media from like, all right, you recorded Isaac, you take a break, maybe you go on Reddit and then record another one, or you don't have that gap?
I do have the gap from time to time, but I don't know. I don't let it get too far. Like I think I know myself well enough, and I'm gonna flip this back to you when I'm done with this. But I know myself well enough that I know like where I get sticky.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know if I go on Twitter and I tweet something, that's like 10 minutes minimum gone because I have to make the tweet, and then you can't just put it out there. You got to refresh and be like, are people responding to this? And then some person responds and they're being kind of snippy about it, and you're like, I got to reply to that guy. So I think like that's what I avoid.
Okay.
And I think about it like I haven't made the tweet yet, but it's been percolating in my brain for like a week. It's just like, man, imagine like if you could just not interact with like mean-spirited content designed to make you angry on social media on like a daily basis, and instead you did something productive with that time. Like how much better would your life look after like a week or a month or a year? But I'm interested for you as well because I mean, you have 3 different things going minimum, like the stream, the YouTube channel, and like your main gigs. So like, how do you avoid that?
Well, I don't really do a great job of it, but I think like just hearing you saying like you have traps or sticky areas you avoid. Like when you said that, I thought my mind went to one thing. Like sometimes, all right, I'll have time to record a couple videos, and I'm like, oh, Mel's streaming, so I'll pop in and say hi, and then I'm like, now I'm thinking, okay, that's a minimum like 12 to 15 minute deal when you do that. So I think for me, I need to do a much better job of that. But a lot of where I get sticky is, and I don't necessarily view it as a bad thing. I'll spend a lot of some time responding, like to tweets and stuff like that, which I think isn't, we talked on the first episode about wasting time. I don't feel like it's a waste of time to do that. It's not like I was, watching meme videos or anything like that. I feel like that would be like deleted time. So I don't know. I know that we go back and forth on it, but I in particular on Tuesday nights, I feel like that's my biggest thing is controlling time in between like recording or streaming when I'm allotting that work time. That's an area that I think you and I will probably talk about a lot over the course of this podcast, because it's one thing I'm self-aware, and I know that's the area that if I can just tweak it a little more, I think it's a difference maker.
Yeah, for me, Tuesday is super easy, so I can't relate at all.
Well, so Tuesday nights, what I'm talking about is Ryan, myself, and 2 other guys, Austin and Melf. We've been doing these collaborations for 2.5 years. Start on YouTube, then to Twitch, and normally we start on 7:30, and then go to question mark. And for me, that question mark could be like 11:30, midnight. And then I don't know if you experience this, but when I'm done with the show or done recording, it's not like I'm tired. Like I'm amped up, and it's like I drink 10 cups of coffee. Is it like that for you, or is it just me?
I think I wouldn't be able to sleep for a little bit after I stream for sure. But I'm definitely tired after a stream. Like I don't finish a stream and then go like, oh, I'm going to record like 5 videos right away. Usually I finish and then I'll get something to eat. I'll drink like, 2 liters of water. I'll go to the bathroom. I'll come back and like just mess around on the internet for like 15 minutes. And then I'm like, okay, now I'm recharged again. I've switched my brain from like responding to absolutely every comment that I see to like being on my own track so I can talk for half an hour, and like I'm back into it.
I was trying to think, I think it was today, I was thinking about what job out there is the most similar to ours. And I look at it about 2 ways. I look at it as like a radio jockey, like it's the guys that spin, but also the guys in the trailer that are looking at 20 screens at a time, cut to camera 3, do this. I mean, not to that extent, but it's just, and I know it's not like this for you, but we don't just sit down and just play a game. It's like there's a lot going on, and so I'm like trying to think mentally when I'm done with a show, like my mind is still like operating on like 20 screens as opposed to, in real life, you're just kind of like one to one. So I don't know, man, that's been like a something. Another thing I want to work on is figuring out Tuesdays, because it's something that I want to conquer, but we're not quite there yet.
Dude, what you just said though, as I've been talking about this in my solo streams for a while, I want to run it by you without, putting my finger on the scale. Do you think that streaming for like, as long as you've streamed so far has actually had an impact on your intelligence? Because I mean, now I'm putting my finger on the
positive
scale.
or negative way.
In either way. But I've been talking about it, and I'm like, I think that, spending like 3 to 6 hours a day reading single lines that are just like self-contained ideas that are not like a story that's building something, and then like, looking at the screen and constantly having your attention divided, I think it's made me a little stupider, to be honest. And not in a way that can't be like, fought against and corrected. But I find like after I finish a stream, my attention span is like 0. Like I need instant gratification constantly.
Yeah. When you talk about smarter, I think of intellect. What I think it does do, I think it hones skills, whether or not how applicable they are to everyday life, but in terms of taking feedback instantly and either being able to like not let it affect you, or enacting on and be like, oh, that's a really good idea. How fast can I do that live and on the fly in the middle of playing a game? But I don't, but in terms of intellect, I'm trying to think like, have I learned anything streaming? I think maybe just skills, like more comfortable on camera, being able to work on telling better stories. If you tell a story and you get resident sleepers in chat, it's like, okay, that why didn't that story go well? And versus other times, you do something and you get a positive reaction. So I think you develop skills. I don't know how translatable they are to real life. But I don't know.
I mean, the number of times I like say a sentence and then 10 seconds later, someone will type the sentence in chat and be like, what did you mean by this? And I'm like, I don't even remember saying it. Like the sentence, it just got purged from my brain as soon as it left my mouth.
You bring up something though that I have a pretty strong opinion on, is that if people ask you the same question over and over again in chat, let me ask you this. What is your take on that? It could be, hey, did you know you could do this in a game? Or, hey, did you know that this happened with the Canucks? Or, hey, what time is the podcast? Or how do I listen to the podcast? If you see that a bunch of times, how do you handle that?
Yeah, I don't have like I don't think I have a plan or like a routine for it. What I do is like, I think that I think all streamers can probably relate to this. When you're live, there's like 2 different modes you go between, I think. Maybe more than 2, but at least 2. One is I know what I'm talking about. This is what I want to talk about right now. And like nothing that happens in chat could possibly get me to deviate from that. So, when you start talking about something where, it might take you 10 minutes to get to your point, that's the mindset you're in. And then there's like, I don't know what I'm talking about at all. Every 30 seconds, I need a new topic just to keep things going. That's when I go to chat and I'm like, hey, how do you feel about the Tyler Toffoli trade with the Canucks? And I'm like, okay, we'll talk about it. And then sometimes I can be a little, I guess, smarmy about answering questions that have been asked a lot. But I think that usually I'd lean on chat when I don't know what to talk about, even if the question's been asked 100 times. I mean, with getting over it, dude, it's so frustrating because people backseat the game and the game is just using your hammer to get around. I don't know. I meant to ask you today because I played a little bit of Getting Over It yesterday on stream. People were like, here's how you get through this section. And I'm like, you just use the hammer. You just use the hammer.
Well, I mean, I was referring to the question is that the way I look at it, I always not blame. I put the onus on myself where it's like, hey, like, for example, when's the next episode of the podcast? Like I'll get asked that a lot. And I look at that as like, okay, I haven't done a good enough job communicating that, because one thing like I've learned, and this is coming off of, the TV experience and Big Brother, like I'll still have people come in and Twitch today and be like, hey, I loved you on Big Brother. I didn't know you streamed on Twitch. And I look at that and I'm like, man, I've been streaming since 2012. What is that, 8 years? And there's still people that come in. So I look at that as like, I don't poke that person. I'm like, man, there's still a lot more that I can do to communicate in different ways, in different mediums, to let people know. But to answer your question, I think it, like the way I design the show and the community is like I encourage feedback and like back seating. We call it front seating on the show. But what I will do is if the same like, hey, do this, do this, do this, do this, and I need to make a statement. So for example, people are, to get really granular on Bennett Foddy, there's a lot of people saying, hey, do the slide skip. One, I think I might have done it accidentally. And two, I know I'm gonna have to learn a new technique to do that. So I know for a fact, even if it saves time, I'm not gonna do it. So I'll say that, and then I'll say, hey, mods, can you please make a command called, slide skip or whatever, because I'm not gonna do it. So I try to do that so that the information is still there. But I don't know. I always just look at, if I get recurring questions, I'm like, okay, that's not on them for not knowing. That's on me.
I've taken a page out of your book for that, because previously, I'm definitely, especially like a couple of years ago, I was guilty of thinking I just like had it figured out, right? I was like, Isaac comes out at 6 a.m. every day. A video comes out at 9. A video comes out at noon. So if somebody's like, when's Isaac? I'm like, that person hasn't done their research and they should know. But then I from hearing you talk about this stuff in the past, and just from observing the way that you promote your stuff and constantly reinforce that stuff, I've been way more open to doing that. So whenever normally, like over the past 4 years, when I finish a stream, I'm just like, the stream's over, go watch Kate, or go watch Apollo, or go watch Malf, or whatever. Now I make a point at the end of each stream to promote something. I'll be like, hey, new Northernlion tries come out every day at 9 a.m. Pacific time. Check the Wire came out this morning at 3 a.m. Pacific. Go watch it. Or like, the finale of Golden Goblet comes out tomorrow. Go watch that. So I think just reinforces for people that like, this is when this comes out, for one. And I think if you already knew that it came out there, I was worried that it would kind of alienate you, but nobody actually cares at all. They're like, oh, maybe it slipped my mind, or maybe like it just amps up the excitement that much more.
Yeah, and I think it segues into something. You talk about promoting something at the end of your show. It segues into something that you and I talked pre-show about whether or not we're going to bring it up. But for context, Ryan has a much larger audience than I do. There's a lot of different variances in that.
Not on Twitter,
but let's say for YouTube and Twitch. And so when we talk about collaborating, right? Like there's the inherent, intrinsic fun of it, right? So like when we do Team Unity or you and I, there's a lot of fun, right? Like if it wasn't fun, or if it was hard to work with you, like it was awkward, we wouldn't do it, right? But then there's like the back end, or the business side of it, is like, where's the value, right? And this is like gonna sound selfish, but this is part of the deal, right? It's like when you bring up at the end of the NLSS, hey, you guys, talk about your channel. That, like, outside of having fun, that is a huge value proposition for someone coming on your show, because someone like me, for example, who just recently, and I'm super excited about, I probably average around 500 viewers, but to be in front of an audience of Ryan's of 4,000, 4,500, 5,000, 6,000 live viewers, like essentially you're like handing the microphone over and say, hey, Dan, you have 30 seconds to talk to these people. And if they enjoyed you, where could they find you? And that's like a huge value proposition. And I think for me, I always, once you and I got comfortable, then, I pushed a little bit to do that, because it's always, it's just, if you want to grow and continue to do that, that is. But to kind of come full circle about this, and we talked about this, and you're like, hey, I saw you cross something off on the list. And there was this comment, and essentially it was, hey, Ryan's the successful one, so the podcast should be about him. Dan has just rode his coattails. And immediately that struck me, not as I was angry or anything like that, but something I feel that I wanted to explain, because for whatever reason it struck in a chord with me. And I don't, for me, I told this, I said 10,000% meeting you, working with you has helped me tremendously beyond exposure, right? Just being around you, picking up bits from you, understanding how to, poke fun and work with other people and stuff. I've learned so much from you. Your consistency, man. Ryan's putting out 5 videos. you can do too. But beyond that, like even with that exposure, and this is what I feel like I would talk to what I wanted to address is that you still got to put out good content. You know, you still, just because someone can go on your show and then the next day it's not like they're, you know, they don't have an audience of 5,000 like you. Someone's got to make, you know, we made thousands of videos and shows. And so I just felt like that is 100% part of the luck, part of being successful, which is a whole different story. I think we'll talk about that next episode, what success is. But you still got to do a lot of work to even have a crack at, you know, growing this thing. But I don't know. You brought up, you're like, hey, I saw you crossed out talking about riding coattails on that. What was your take on it?
I mean, I have a lot of thoughts on it, honestly. I echo what you say, which is like, you know, in any situation, you can't really control who has like a larger audience. You know, there's going to be some kind of dynamic there where it's going to flow one way or the other. But I don't think you can look at it just on like a number versus number basis, because like I think there's metrics that like different channels do really well in. Like, for one, you're growing a lot right now on Twitch. You said your average viewer count is 500, but I think like when I check the stream, especially during getting over it, it's like 900, 1,000, 1.2 thousand, et cetera, et cetera. But the thing I'm struck by is like, compared to other streams with the same viewer count, chat is moving like at a serious clip. So like the engagement that people have, which I think is a really good sign of how much they're actually entertained and enjoying the show, is like insane. Like your chat at like 1,000 moves faster than mine at 5,000, depending on what I'm playing, I would say. So especially if you just fell down. But so I think like that's one aspect of it. And I've never really looked at it like through the super cynical lens of like I'm the big channel, so like you should relish any opportunity to, you know, work with me so that you can get exposure. And I definitely I agree with what you're saying, that it's what you do with it. You know, a lot of people have been exposed to the same community, and the people that have been exposed to that community have very different levels of success from that, to be honest. But even then, like on top of that, I don't know. I guess I don't really see it as like a riding of coattails, except that like I also am riding coattails. Like I didn't make Isaac. Like I got an audience because Isaac was made in such a way that it was like really watchable, and I kind of like capitalized on that. And that's why like I always try to pay it forward to the games I play too. Like it might not be the best for engagement or like search engine optimization, but I always make sure to like put the link to the game right at the top of the description page, because I didn't make the thing that is making you watch me in the first place most of the time.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up. Like out of everything, I always know in your descriptions, like you're all like your link to the game is always there. But I don't know, man. And this is, I don't think there's two things I don't think we've talked about in regards to this. And I just feel like there's a few people that you can think of or whatever, at least for me, there's a few people that I think like help me like get on, or, you know, have definitely helped, like I said, beyond exposure. But there was the moment in time, and I don't know if you remember it, but it was the week when Tarkov was like popping off, and it was the biggest audience I ever had like naturally watching because of Tarkov. And I don't know if you remember, but I was like DMing him like, hey, when you going live, because it was important for me to be like, okay, hey, look, here's an opportunity that I have to like host Ryan. You know, like I'm like, it was really important to me. I don't know how it worked out, but that was something that was really important to me, because I'm very aware of the situation and how luck plays involved, but also with the work ethic. And something else I've never told you is that there was someone, and I'm not going to get into particulars, but there's someone, it's happened more than once, but I've been like starting to follow someone on Twitch or watch some of their YouTube stuff, and then we connect, and then they'll send me a DM and be like, hey, can you tell Ryan I said this? And I'm like, but this is like a content creator of like a peer type, and I'm like, man, like I'm pretty socially aware, and now I know like I'm a conduit for you to get to Ryan. And then I'm like, okay, hey, you know, then I just turn it off. But are you aware that happens?
I guess like I have experienced it happening sometimes. Like people will tell me, hey, there's like a dude in my comments or my chat that wants me to relay something to you. And like, if you relay it once, that's fine. But if it comes up again, I'm like, please don't do that. For a couple of, it's annoying to hear, but also I don't want you to feel compelled to be like an intermediary and like push someone's message ahead in the queue and make sure it gets to me through like a laundered source. Like I resent that, honestly. But I mean, to get back to what you were talking about the host, I 100% remember it. And I also remember that after the stream, Kate was like, yo, that was really nice that Dan hosted you when he was, riding that wave of viewership today. And, she's right. I don't judge anybody in the community for this, but there have been situations in the past where, like, I host people in the community, and then when they go offline, they host somebody else that's like just getting started. And I understand the compelling idea behind that is like, oh, we're like paying it forward and like boosting people up and stuff like that. But I'm also like, but I hosted you. And like we work together a lot. So like when it's time for me to not be live, you expect the host. But when you're not live, you're like, oh, I'm going to pay it forward to somebody with like 10 viewers just because like it matters that much more to that person. But it feels like a breaking of that kind of like reciprocity.
Yeah. And I will say this from the other side of it, though. There is an element of, at least for me, like, and I think about it sometimes, not so much anymore, but it's like, hey, and this is where I don't focus on this stuff, but it sometimes come up naturally. Like, all right, you have like 100 to 200 people watching you, and Ryan's got 5,000. You're like, does that even matter? And but to you, but it does, and I feel like maybe from the other side coin, it's like, you don't always think about it on like, oh yeah, it's an appreciated thing. But I think that's a fair statement. But also, it was surprising for me. Like, it was surprising for me to hear you say that, not in a bad way. I'm like, oh, like Ryan's a human too. Like that stuff does matter.
To me, it's not like I'm like, oh, Apollo didn't host me yesterday. He hosted B-Rex instead, but I hosted him 3 times in this past week. Like, I don't look at it like that. But we've had conversations on the NLSS before where I would like, you can see who hosts you and you can see who you host. And sometimes I'm like, man, there's a lot of people that I talk to almost every day that I host and they don't host me. And then I ask them about it and they're like, oh, you don't need it. And I'm like, well, I know I don't need it, but at the same time, I gave it to you.
Well, I think that's the problem, is the assumption that you don't need it. And I think that's where things get really, really murky, and why I don't focus on numbers is because it's like you're making snap judgments on what people need versus, hey, it's like, it doesn't matter. Just, you're friends with someone or whatever. But at the same time, I think to come full circle on the whole thing, like the relationship between you and I, it was an organic thing. It was never like, hey, like I didn't go to Mathis. I'm like, hey, introduce me to NL. And I feel like I'm maybe a little more hypersensitive to that stuff just because that's how my brain's wired. So when I see people doing that, I'm like that's tough. It'd be like someone just going to you, be like, hey, can you host me? And you're like, no, like I don't know. And I think this is this whole conversation may ruffle feathers, but the way I look at things, not this statement, but the way I look at things is, and I'm going to talk about this in the first episode, is put on a good show and don't worry about everything else. Everything else will take care of itself. But I think it was cool for me. It was just hearing you say that like, hey, it matters to you to be hosted. Like, that's something that I know other people will listen to, and myself, not that I ever hesitate to host you, but I know like in the early days, I would think like, oh, like, is it even going to matter to him? I think that's cool to hear you say that.
I think also, like, I mean, this is more specific than is necessary, but like, you host other people that are not me. And I always get it. First off, because the timelines don't always line up. Yeah. So what are you going to do in that situation? But also, I'm like, Dan is like, he's self-motivated and he's not building like from within the community that already exists on my end. You're kind of like a little bubble attached to that community, but you're doing your own thing. Like, you do collaborations with like Deadly Slob and, the stuff that you do on the podcast by inviting other people that are completely outside of the community. So I'm like, that stuff, like, there's no hard feelings to begin with to anybody about this stuff. But there's definitely no hard feelings there, because I get that you're not trying to like swell within the community exclusively. You're trying to get your own thing going on as well.
Yeah, and for me, there's this internal I don't know the best way to say it. Not that's not the right word, but there's something for me inside where it's like, okay, hey, look, whether or not you realize you've done a lot for me in not just exposure, but everything. And it's like, okay, hey, like how can I provide value back to you? And for example, for the podcast, like the podcast doing this, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, the value add for you outside of, we enjoy each other and the conversation natural is that, hey, you record it, we record it, and then you don't have to do anything audio wise. It's like we put it in the system that, I've like, there's value in that for you, so it's like, for me, any chance or any angle I can get to like siphon value back to you, like I try to find ways to do that because that's how I feel. It's just, you've done a lot for me, and like, I don't know, I don't want to harken back to it, but that Tarkov thing it was really important, and and I'm glad. I think it worked out, but
yeah, no, I appreciate it a lot, and I mean, I think you are right. That's like one of the pillars of the value that you bring is, I mean, organizationally, I just show up for this basically, and then like drag the video file onto the YouTube uploader, which is super easy for me. But also, and I talked about this especially in my January channel update. I think that like the attitude that you I should say, towards like streaming and YouTube and even stuff like TikTok and trying out other platforms, like the fact that you're passionate about it and you're hustling, like that's also where the value is. Because for a long time, was kind of just in a position where I was like, I'm coasting, everything's good, but like, what's the point of like putting in overtime when the overtime is going to pay like substantially less dividends than just doing, the 8 hours or whatever a day. So the value there is like, there's a disproportionate benefit to the attitude that you bring as well, because it's infectious.
Well, I appreciate that, man. And to kind of get off each other's.
Isn't that why people are watching?
Yeah,
to see us on each other's.
No, it's a family friendly podcast. But no, I feel like that, like, and I'll tell you another quick story, but I think there's an organic way to do stuff like that, right? To like connect with someone that you may like look up to or that you want to collaborate with at some time. And I'm going to tell a quick story, but there's this chiptune creator called Chips and Cellos. And I was referred to them like, hey, someone in the community said, hey, I think you'll like their music. Cool. I follow them on Instagram, like some of their songs, like, oh, I really like the song. Cool. That's it. Just from context, they're a very small, following. So they come to me and say, hey, are there any songs you'd love us to chiptune rendition? I'm like, yeah, there's a couple songs that keep getting struck down by VODs in the show. Like, I'd love for you to redo this. And they're like, okay, cool, we'll make it. And then like I play their song on the show now. When I connect with them, I had no preconceived notion that they were going to make a song. I think when they made the song, maybe, but I doubt it. Did I think they think I was going to like, they didn't say, hey, here's the song, make sure to link us everywhere and do all this stuff. It was just something that naturally happened where like that kind of stuff happens all the time. And so I know, like, I'm not trying to give advice, but if there's someone out there right now listening, be like, hey, I would love to work with X one day or this, like find a way where you can like do something or provide value to them without expecting anything in return, because that's how like stuff naturally happens. And I feel like that's how it happened with you and I. And like, I don't want to go down Old Town Road and back in the old days, but I remember Matt is sending me a Skype message saying, hey, do you want to do a collaboration with me and Ryan on this Gauntlet game? I'm like, yeah, that's amazing. But that wasn't like in my head. It wasn't be like, oh, let's me and Ryan and you collaborate. It just happened, and
yeah,
I don't know. So we went a little
I'm with you on that. When it happens naturally, it's it's good. I think I agree with what you're saying too. I think you're dancing around the idea to some extent that the smaller channel should provide something to the larger channel, not for free necessarily, but because like it aligns with what they're passionate about and what they're doing in the first place. And I agree 100%. Like I had an animator got in touch with me, and 2 years ago I would have said no for sure. But he was like, hey, I really like your content. I'd like to make something, like with your image in it for free and just give it to you. Would you be interested in me doing that? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And he's shown me like some mock-ups of it so far. And I'm like, it looks really cool. And this is a topic I'm sure for a future podcast.
Yeah, I'm going to write it down.
Yeah, because I know you've talked about
Yeah.
it before, people working on
It
specs.
will set people on fire.
I'm
So
aware, yeah.
so we're gonna dedicate a lot of time to it.
But I think that one thing where there's no gray area, I think, is if somebody comes to you and is like, hey, I want to do this for free as like a one-time basis without the idea that like, oh, if you like it, we're going to start, we're going to give you one animation a month for this and, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that applies to working with other content creators as well, who just are streamers or YouTubers. It's been really nice having like a suite of collaborators that we can work with whenever we need something, but it does also come with its own unique problem set as well. If you ever try to do something solo, or you exclude somebody you've worked with in the past to bring in somebody you haven't, like it causes some drama in the community from time to time, which is frustrating. But I think it comes down to like the idea, like with you, I've never had the expectation that you think I'm going to invite you to everything that I do, and you're going to invite me to everything that you do. And I think that leads to it, honestly, just making for more entertainment in the future.
Yeah, like how do you manage that on the back end? Like because I look at you and you're like Switzerland, like you're very amicable. You don't ruffle. Like I'm saying, like to work with and like on a behind the scenes level, like really easy to work with. You're not like abrasive. So like I look at you as like Switzerland. So when like how do you deal, or someone listening, like how would you deal with a problem with someone from this like suite of creators, I guess?
I mean, like one thing I've done a lot, especially, it hasn't happened a lot recently, but like over the years on the NLSS, sometimes I would cross the line in terms of like making fun of somebody, and like it's all meant in good spirit, but then you realize like you've made fun of them for something that actually is like one of the button issues for them, where they're like, that's not funny.
Mm-hmm.
So like I always have approached people after the show when that has happened and been like, yo, I messed up. So I think like that's important. But in terms of like people feeling excluded from stuff, I don't know how to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
That's something I'm still working on, and it's been kind of like an evolving process. It's one of the reasons that like I've started doing a lot more solo stuff, to be honest, is because like, especially there's been a few periods in like the NLSS where this has happened, but like we have like me, then we have like a smaller group of people that are on constantly. And as they expand their own networks, they are like, hey, could this person come on the show? Could this person come on the show? And then it sometimes, like in 2013, we had shows that were like 14 people or something like stupid. Like you couldn't hear anybody talk, right? So I always like, right now I'm in one of those phases where I'm like, I don't want to cut people off, but I want to do like more of my own stuff, because I think it does lead to hurt feelings. I mean, like, pardon me, who wants to be like, hey, I'm around for the show today, and then the person running the show is like, I don't want you. So I'm working harder now to like establish that expectation that like this is my thing, and sometimes I would really like to like work on it together, but I also like on days where I want to be alone, I want that respected, and I don't want to feel like pressured into letting everybody be on the show that wants to be on the show just because they're around, because I think it dilutes the product somewhat a lot of the time.
Well, I think it's very reasonable, but for you, I don't know. I think there's a different expectation, and this is no judgment. People do things how they want. I couldn't see you just going like in a group, hey, I'm available for this, hint, hint, hint.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think there's a difference in mentality in terms of like what you expect versus how things are. And I think this is where, I don't know. I just think it's just a different mentality. One's not right and one's not wrong. But I don't know. I look at things as like you're in control of your lane, and when you can work with other people and it makes sense, cool. But like I don't ever like what I expect from you. I expect that, within 5 to 10 minutes, like, hey, we're going to do the podcast at 3. You're going to be here at 3. That's it.
Yeah.
Like, but in terms of me being on the NLSS and stuff like that, or whatever, or you wanting to be on the show, like, I don't know. But I feel for you, because I think I'm more abrasive and not abrasive, black and white and like logical in that. And I think you're more caring in that regard. Like you're very aware of people's feelings and stuff like that, and maybe I don't know. And I feel like you do a really good job of that. But you know, to call you out maybe to a little bit, like you said, to like diluting your own product or to your own, you know, but not this benefit, but
No, I honestly, I think that's fair. Like, I think that it's going to be weird for people to hear, but one of the things that I'm not going to say has held me back, but one of the things that I've struggled with is being like, you know, the best people for this project are not necessarily the people that are going to get invited, because it's easier to just invite the people that you would expect to invite and not have to hurt their feelings, instead of having to have the conversation with them that's like, honestly, I just don't feel like you would be the best fit for this.
and you're saying that's how you used to do things, and now you're flipped on the other side.
I'm trying to flip it, but
Yeah.
what it also leads to a lot of the time is I'm like, let's not do that project. Which is it's a shame, but you
Yeah.
know, it is what it is, but you know, you are managing people's feelings to some extent. But that's why, to be honest, I think it all is encompassed in that kind of conversation you brought up about like riding coattails. Like, people have been exposed to the broader NLSS community, which is really just like the Isaac community, but in a smaller subset, or like the XCOM community. You get the idea. It came from an original source, is what I'm trying to say. And like, some people have taken that and harnessed it and used it to like build up their own stuff. And I think some people are kind of like, this is like my lane now where I exist. And there's almost like the expectation that like anything that the community does will include them in every circumstance. And for me, I have a mindset that's similar to that and like sympathetic to that. But I'm also like, especially in 2020 so far, I'm on this new grind where I'm like, you know, I want to try new things. I want to get new people involved. And maybe like, yeah, we like tap somebody to collaborate once, and then we never work with them again, instead of having to hear for like 5 years, like, when is this person going to be back on the show?
Yeah, and I know that's something that I don't think we've talked about privately, but I think it's just something that's kind of known, is that, you know, I don't want to call individual people out, but Hafu like used to have her on the show, and then it was like a wave of like, and I'm gonna say how I would feel during that, but you tell me how you feel. So Hafu's on the show, she's a good fit, it's cool, things are going well. Then she's not on the show, and then it's like, Hafu, when? And then the way I would feel that you got to kind of negate is like, well, you don't like the show that I'm presenting without this person. So like, how did you manage that? Because then I also know it trickled to her as well, as like people were like going to her like, hey, when are you getting on the show again?
Yeah, it sucked. And like, it still sucks, to be honest. Like, I mean, it has not ruined the show, or it's barely even like compromised it in any way. But you're right, it is like disheartening that, you know, you're in the middle, you're like 90 minutes into a 3-hour long show, and then someone's like, when's Hafu coming back on the show? And you're like, I love Hafu. I loved working with Hafu. I would love to work with Hafu again. There's a lot of reasons she's not on the show. The big one is that she's got her own super successful thing going on her own end. And especially last year when Team Fight Tactics blew up, I'm not going to be like, hey, Hafu, I know you're getting like 15,000 viewers right now, and, you know, you're like the second most popular stream on the platform, but like, would you really like to not stream, for one, and just be in a Discord call with us? Like, I'm not going to ask that. She's got to, I always felt bad whenever she's on the show and not streaming, because I'm like, you're donating your time, and your time is very valuable. So it is super frustrating. Even with like Check the Wire, we did episode 1, and people are like, oh, you know, it'd be cool is if they brought this person on as a guest. And I'm like, we've only done 1 episode. It's like, it subtly sends the message. And I think you've got to try to protect yourself against that, because that might not even be what they're trying to do, but it sends the message like, yeah, it was okay, but what would really take it to the next level is, you know, if you did this.
Yeah, and I think it's one part of the podcast where we literally ripped down the curtain. You're like, hey, this is something that like we're dealing with a bunch of different people and interpersonal relationships, and a lot of it, and I think the for the most part, and I think it's the best way to do it, is that you put on the show and you don't see you don't need to know. Honestly, you don't need to know, but my thing is, you put on an entertaining show, and like, don't let the audience worry about that stuff. Like, but I think at the same time, I think it's cool to talk about, because, you know, people can learn from how we deal with people and things like that. But, and this is to spin things back to me, which I don't do and I'm working on. But for example, today, You will never hear me say that I'm sick. But like today on the show, people are like, hey, Dan, is your voice, are you sick? Are you sick? Are you sick? And the answer is yes. But I'm not going to tell you that because that's not important. It's not important. The important is that you're here and you're being entertained. And so you'll never know if I'm sick because I don't want you to know, because I don't want that to be the focus of the show, because the focus of the show is you being entertained, you being distracted, you having a good time, not, oh, Dan's sick, I feel bad for him.
First off, you sound great.
Oh,
you're
thanks.
compensating super well
Thanks.
for being sick. Now I'm like self-conscious because I'm not sick, but I got a little hoarseness.
But that's what I'm talking
tired.
about. But that's the thing, like if it, by me telling you I'm sick, like it makes you feel a certain way. So I don't tell you.
True.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe I'm playing on different.
But I put something tangentially similar to this on like the show notes, and I was gonna ask you too. Is like, I feel that exact same way when chat becomes, and this happened for like a year on Team Unity in advance of Team Unity playing, where the chat would just be like 100% recommendations. And it's like, it always brings my mood down a lot when chat is no longer like focused on what's happening on the screen. And instead they're like, you should play Payday, you should play Left 4 Dead, you should play Dota 2 Underlords, blah, blah, blah. Because I'm like, and I've tried to do a better job of this recently, but I'm like, a recommendation is not in its own way insulting, but I think it does kind of send the message that's like, what you're doing right now is whatever. Like, I'm here, I'm watching it. But what would really make it take off is if you played like this game instead. And I've always had this idea that like most of the time, and this is why I've talked recently, kind of like I need to clarify better, but like I've talked about tricking the audience. The stuff that people have suggested, I've done, and it's been like 50-50 sometimes. Stuff that people were like, do not do this, it's going to be a disaster, oftentimes has been like 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10. So I'm like, everybody, I think they're like, I want to see my favorite game. And I'm like, what you really want to see is something that makes you forget about what your favorite game is or what I should be playing, and instead has you like laser focused on what's happening.
I think this goes back to something that you told me or we talked about one time specifically regarding this, is that you have to have a direction in your head of where you want to take the show or what you want to play, and that be like, I don't want to say exactly what you say verbatim, but you're like, have an idea of what you want to do and do it, and then read the feedback after, as opposed to like you said, opening it up. I don't want to say what you said, but you know, it's like when you open it up, it's like you're having like 1,000 different voices, so it's not going to line up, versus if you walk in and say, hey, here's where we're going, people know what to expect. I don't know.
Actually, I think I wanted to ask you as well. I think this ties into it. I know we're getting close to time at some point here, but like I was thinking, what is like the actual reason you stream or make videos? Like, obviously one of the reasons is it's like your job, or you know, it's a side gig, and like another reason is that you enjoy it. But like when you actually sit down to stream or make a video, like what are you hoping that the end result is?
And that's a deep question,
and that's what I've been thinking about it a lot for a couple of weeks.
I've never sat down to think about it that way. And I think what you just forced me to do is think, okay, why do I do it? Outside of, like you said, selfish reasons, like I really enjoy it. It's something, I don't know. I feel that we're all wired to do something. And when you find it, like, you know it, like I, for a month, I think this was like 10, 15 years ago, spent a month being a pharmaceutical sales rep. And from the first day, I'm like, I can't, like, this is not for me. And then I went into teaching. But on the flip side, when you find, like, when I started doing this, I'm like, oh, this is amazing. Oh, this is what I want to do. Oh, it's going to take 10, 15, 20 years to be able to do it full time. I still want to do it. But I think really what you forced me to do is really put the value on it, is like, I know that people really enjoy it. And I know that because of like DMs and messages and stuff like that, is like, outside of that, you really like it. It's really cool to know that what you're doing has value the same way like a television show may have, or like it. I know it's weird to talk about in that regard in like this new media era, but there's people like, I'll get a message, and this is not to toot my own horn, but it's like, hey, like, I moved this around so I could watch the show. And I'm like, sometimes I do that too for like a show like Survivor. And I'm like, but it forces you to like, to really say, hey man, you are Survivor for someone. You are a Canucks game for someone. And I think that's, I mean, there's a lot of weight to it, but what about you? What makes you do this?
I think like definitely there's part of that for me. Like some of the best comments we got about this podcast for me were not like, oh, I was so entertained. It was a great listen. Obviously, it's nice to hear that as well. But people who were like, I started listening to the podcast and like half an hour in, I like went to the gym because you guys like inspired me to waste less time, or like, you know, I did a project that I've been working on for a bit, but it kind of been on the back burner. So I think like having that kind of impact in for people is really impressive. And it's something that I've been trying to talk about more on like solo shows is I'm like, don't just watch the show. I appreciate it. Don't get me wrong. But like, if I'm not being that entertaining, put me on monitor too. And like, I don't know, go start learning something that you want to learn, or like go on the treadmill or something like that. So there's part of that for me. And then the other part I think is that like, and I still haven't come up with like a good answer, but even as a kid, I like always just enjoyed entertaining. Like I always enjoyed making people laugh, or like having a conversation with somebody and they're like, oh, that's like really insightful what you said. So I think for me, like this and there's actually two things, because like honestly, the other one is having a career or even just a hobby where what you get out of it is exactly what you put in. Like most jobs, if you half you know what it for a day, it doesn't really matter. If you work twice as hard one day, it doesn't really matter. Having a job where you know that's not the case, and if you really knock it out of the park, usually you see better results, and if you don't work, then you don't see any results. That is another motivating factor for me as well. Like I get a lot of pleasure out of that. But I think innately, even as a kid, I was like, I always liked entertaining people.
Yeah, I think that's like the cool thing where you said is like what you put in is what you get out. And I think, and I don't, like I said, the second time I'm going to say this word cringe because that's not it. But I think you're right. Like, you know, whether someone, for internally, it's like, hey, by us talking about certain stuff, it's going to help people do stuff. And I don't want to say that's not our goal, but I just feel like there's like this, and this, you're talking to someone that used to college speak about this stuff. And like, it got to the point for me where I'm like, man, this doesn't feel right. Like, I don't like, there's this aura around like motivation that I don't really like. Like, I don't like, you know, but I think people respond better or are more apt to take something based on action. Like, us talking about stuff we do versus, hey, you should go do this because da 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 da. You know, it's just, I think people see that you're happy and I'm happy, and it's not always perfect, and there's things that, you know, we got to work on. But here's some of the things that we do or try to do that make us happy, you know, and that's one of the things we won't get a chance to talk about today. But one of the things that I want to talk about with you next show is that, like, you learn a lot of stuff outside of gaming, you know, and I want to talk about that. But I don't know. And you know, I get a lot of messages about, hey, you know, your attitude and staying positive has really helped me. And that was always kind of one of the goals of the show without it being like hokey, you know, like, you know, because I'm into, you know, self-development and stuff like that, but I don't like the hokey stuff. But I think to wrap things up on this is that, you know, when you approach something, you either say, hey, like, this glass is half full or it's half empty, but here's what it is. And I think the more you can look at it as half full, not all the time, I just think it leads to a happier life, and it leads to better content, better shows, better podcasts, versus, you know, people don't want to hear you and I complain for an hour. They just, I don't think that, I don't want to put that out there. I know you don't want to put that out there, because then you wouldn't get the message. Hey, you helped me go to the gym for the first time. Like, that's amazing for you, but that's way better for that person that's doing, you know, like, that's, if they keep that going, they're going to be happier. I don't know. I don't want to spin out of control here. But.
No, I want to make sure you get the last word so that people, they leave on the impression that you have spoken in a more balanced way this time.
Well, and I want to, like, the two big pieces of feedback we got from episode 1, the overlay was wrong. My name was over Ryan's head and his name was over mine. Fixed. The other one, that I kept diverting and interviewing Ryan, which isn't Ryan. It's my fault, because that's the challenge for me on this podcast, is to, like, tone that down a little bit. Although that's how I'm naturally inclined, because I don't like to talk about myself. So, but that's on me. So don't say, hey, Ryan, stop talking. Don't tweet him that. Say, hey, Dan, talk more,
Nobody did that, thankfully.
But yeah, no. So this second episode, man, I think it was a good one. Just a heads up, you go to checkthewire.com. It will take you to all the audio feeds, Google, iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify. And if you want the video version of this, if you're listening to this live and you're not already watching a video, Ryan, where can they find it?
It comes out on youtube.com/northernlion every Tuesday, 3 a.m. Pacific, 6 a.m. Eastern. And once we get a few episodes, I'm going to put it in a playlist, and I'm going to put the playlist on the homepage of youtube.com/northernlion, so it's easier to find.
Awesome. And the reason people say, why so early? Why so early? My reasoning behind it, and I think Ryan just kind of trusted me on it, is that I like to put it out in the morning because people commute, or people, I know 6 a.m. Eastern is more morning for me than him, but the goal is to put out Tuesday morning. So, hey, if you have somewhere to go Tuesday morning, driving, school, work, whatever, you can expect it on your commute there. Cool. All right. Good good second episode, Ryan. Anything you want to add or before we wrap things up?
No, not at all. Excited for it to come out and see what people think.
All right, cool. All right. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we will see you guys next Tuesday, 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Later, guys.